I still remember that morning vividly, though it felt like a nightmare too real to ignore. Chicago in the spring always has its own way of soothing my soul. Flowers beginning to bloom, the fresh yet warm air, and the aroma of coffee from my favorite café often sneaking into the boutique every morning. But that morning was different. I didn't feel the usual calm I always found. There was something gnawing at my stomach, as if a sudden cold wind had swept through my bones. Despite the brightening sunlight, my boutique was still empty. Operating hours hadn't started yet, and I was busy organizing the new summer dress collection that had arrived just last week. My hands moved automatically, folding and rearranging the dresses neatly. But my mind wasn't fully focused on the task. Something was bothering me. Something I couldn't quite explain. Maybe my intuition was working overtime, trying to warn me that today would be one of the defining moments of my life. My phone rang suddenly, breaking my brief daydream. I glanced at the screen for a moment. It was from Eric, my husband. My heart immediately started racing, but I held myself back from reading the message right away. I knew deep down that this wasn't going to be good news. I wasn't even sure if I was ready to read it. Finally, I gave in to my curiosity. I opened the message. Rachel, I've been thinking about this for a long time. I'm not happy anymore. I love Lauren, and she gives me what you never could. Forgive me, but I have to go. Oh, and one more thing. I've emptied our joint account. You'll never be able to catch up with me. Goodbye. I read the message several times over. His words were so cold, so devoid of emotion, like a hard slap that woke me from all the illusions I'd built about our marriage. But strangely, my hands didn't tremble. My lips didn't quiver. My face remained expressionless, as if I had already expected this to happen. I placed the phone on the cash register counter and took a long, deep breath. My boutique was still silent, the soft ticking of the clock, the only sound accompanying the quiet. The morning sunlight filtered through, the thin curtains, illuminating the rows of elegant dresses neatly arranged on the racks. In the middle of the silence, I murmured softly, almost as if speaking to myself. "All right," I said, my voice so calm it surprised even me. "So this is how it ends." I didn't cry. I didn't even feel particularly shocked. Perhaps to an outsider, it might have looked like I was too stunned to react. But the truth was, I had prepared myself for a moment like this, though I'd never been entirely sure if Eric would actually go through with it. Eric was no longer someone I could trust easily. At least, not for a long time now. For months, I had been observing the small changes in his behavior. At first, I dismissed them as work-related stress or exhaustion. But over time, the patterns became increasingly clear. He often came home late at night, sometimes with excuses about important meetings or last-minute projects at the office. His work clothes often smelled of unfamiliar perfume, not the brand he usually wore. His phone was always locked with a passcode, even at home, and he kept it out of my reach. And most painfully, there were moments when he refused to talk to me as if I were a stranger unworthy of his attention. But I am not a woman who can be easily defeated. From the start of our marriage, I knew that love and commitment alone weren't enough. I remembered my mother's advice from years ago. Never rely entirely on anyone, dear. Your love may be whole, but your heart must always have a backup. Those words echoed in my mind every time I felt suspicious of Eric. So, a few months ago, I quietly opened a personal bank account. I transferred most of our savings into it, including the proceeds from investments I had managed over the years. I also began documenting every suspicious transaction Eric made: hotel bills, purchases of luxury items he never used, and even money transfers to unknown accounts. And now, that text message came as the final confirmation. Eric thought I was shattered, leaving me with nothing. But he was wrong. I was already one step ahead. Even before he decided to send that message, I had ensured that he wouldn't have any advantage. After sitting in silence for a while, I went back to work. I continued tidying up the boutique, checking inventory, and writing notes for my employees. Amidst my routine, my phone rang again. Another message from Eric. I know you're probably crying right now, but the truth is, you'll never be able to live without me. Enjoy your ruin, Rachel. I read the message with a faint smile on my lips. I didn't respond. Instead, I placed the phone back on the counter and resumed my work. My hands remained steady, my steps firm. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I wasn't afraid. Only one feeling dominated within me. Certainty. Certainty that I would be fine. Certainty that Eric wasn't just making a big mistake, but that he would never win this game. I've never believed in coincidences. I believe in preparation, strategy, and sharp instincts, all things I've nurtured over the years. So when Eric's message came through, I was ready. Even before he typed those cold words, I was already sitting in my lawyer's office, discussing the legal steps we needed to take. My lawyer, Sarah, is a formidable woman, tough, intelligent, and with an impeccable reputation in Chicago's family law scene. When I explained what was happening, she simply nodded, as if she had anticipated it all along. Rachel, she said in her calm but confident tone, Eric won't have a chance to get away with this. We had meticulously crafted a plan. The first step was to file for an emergency divorce. With the evidence I had gathered, suspicious expenditures, illegal money transfers, even secretly recorded phone calls, we had more than enough to ensure Eric wouldn't be able to hold on to our shared assets. After leaving the lawyer's office, I headed straight to the bank. With one quick phone call, I froze all of our joint assets. His accounts were blocked, his credit cards deactivated, and every financial access he thought he still had disappeared instantly. I also contacted the airline and the hotel where Eric and Lauren had planned their temporary escape. Their flight tickets were canceled, their hotel reservations revoked, and all transactions made using our joint credit card were reversed. When I sent a formal email to the hotel manager, attaching proof that Eric had committed financial fraud, I allowed myself a faint smile. They responded with a formal apology, stating they could no longer accommodate guests under Eric's name. There's no place for people like you, I muttered softly, though no one was there to hear it. And sure enough, a few hours later, I received news from my close friend Claire, who happened to work at a travel agency. She informed me that Eric and Lauren were stranded at the airport with nothing but a backpack between them. Their cash was gone, their credit cards declined, and they had no way to get back home. I didn't feel sorry for them. They deserved every bit of it. But the challenges weren't entirely over yet. A few days after the incident, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I knew well. Diane, Eric's mother. Her voice was angry, full of accusations, as she began speaking without preamble. Rachel, how could you let Eric leave like this? What have you done to him? My son would never do something like this if you hadn't driven him to frustration. I listened to her calmly, without interrupting. After she finished venting her anger, I replied in a flat but determined tone. Diane, I don't want to argue with you, but if you want to know the truth, I can show you everything. I sent her an email with attached documents. Eric's text, messages about his betrayal, records of his illegal money transfers, even photos of hotel and restaurant bills paid with our money. The email ended with a simple sentence. This was his decision, not my fault. A few days later, I received a response from Diane. Her voice this time was different, softer, more hesitant. Rachel, I didn't know he was capable of something like this, she said, her tone bitter. I simply replied, now you do. Gradually, Eric's family began to distance themselves from him. His father stopped defending him. His siblings started avoiding contact. Eric, once considered the golden child of the family, was now ostracized by his own kin. I didn't take pleasure in their downfall. I just knew that the truth always finds its way. The trial came sooner than I had expected. The emergency hearing took place in a cold, sterile courtroom, with beige walls that felt soulless and empty. I sat on the right side of the table, wearing a simple yet elegant black blazer, a symbol that I wasn't just ready to fight, but had prepared myself perfectly for this moment. On the other side, Eric looked tense, his face pale, his hair slightly disheveled, as if he hadn't slept all night. Lauren wasn't there. I suspected she was starting to realize this wasn't the fairy tale romance she had imagined. Sarah, my lawyer, stepped forward with unwavering confidence. She presented the evidence one by one to the judge. Eric's text, messages admitting to embezzlement, bank statements showing illegal transactions, even photos of lavish hotel bills paid with our money. As these documents were projected onto a large screen in the courtroom, I could see panic wash over Eric's face. He no longer looked like the arrogant man who had mocked me. Instead, he resembled a child caught stealing candy from a store. The judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, listened intently. After some deliberation, she finally delivered her verdict. "All joint assets will be frozen," she declared firmly. "The defendant, Eric Dawson, is ordered to return all funds taken from the joint account within 1 month. If not, further legal consequences will follow." I bowed my head for a moment, exhaling deeply. This was the victory I had fought for, but it didn't feel like the euphoria I had imagined. More than anything, it was validation that I had done the right thing, that I was not the weak victim he thought I was. For Eric, however, this marked the beginning of his true downfall. The money he had spent on Lauren, for luxurious vacations, expensive items, and all the extravagance he thought would make him happy, was gone without a trace. When he realized he had nothing left, Lauren left him without hesitation. I heard that she sent him a short message on his phone. "You're not the man I thought you were." And just like that, she disappeared from his life. But Eric's problems didn't end there. His workplace began investigating his unprofessional relationship with Lauren, who turned out to be one of his colleagues. Within 2 weeks, he was fired. His reputation was shattered, and the career he had built for years vanished because of his own greed. Eric didn't give up easily. He tried to appeal the court's decision, hoping to find a loophole to escape all of this. But every step he took was rejected outright. Other judges agreed with the initial ruling. Eric had made a grave mistake, and he had to pay the price for it. What hurt him most, though, was when Lauren started sharing her story on social media. She wrote a long post about how Eric had used her, lied about his marital status, and squandered their money on trivial things. The post went viral within hours, with thousands of people commenting with ridicule and insults. Eric, who had always prided himself on being a successful and classy man, became a laughingstock on the internet. Without a job, without money, and without support from anyone, Eric had no choice but to move back in with his parents at the age of 45. His mother and father, who had initially tried to defend their son, finally realized that Rachel, the woman they had blamed all along, was the real victim in this situation. They began avoiding conversations with him, skipping family gatherings, and no longer inviting him to important events. Eric, once considered the family hero, had become an embarrassing burden. One day, I received a phone call from Diane. Her voice sounded fragile, full of regret. "Rachel, I'm sorry. We misjudged you," she said softly. "We didn't know Eric was capable of doing something so cruel to you." I simply replied, "Sometimes we have to see the truth with our own eyes to truly understand it. Life, I've learned, has a peculiar way of rewarding those who refuse to crumble under pressure." For me, the aftermath of Eric's betrayal became a turning point, not just in my personal life, but also in my career. My boutique, once a modest, little shop tucked away on a quiet Chicago street began to flourish in ways I could never have imagined. In the months following the trial, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. I expanded the store's inventory, hired more staff, and launched an online platform that allowed customers from across the country to browse and purchase my designs. Word spread quickly about the quality and elegance of my collections. Soon, local fashion magazines began featuring my work, praising my unique eye for detail and my ability to create timeless pieces that resonated with modern women. But it wasn't just about business growth. It was about reclaiming my identity. I realized that Eric had underestimated me, not only as a wife, but also as a woman with dreams, ambitions, and resilience. The same strength I had shown during the divorce proceedings now fueled my determination to succeed. Within a year, I opened 2 new branches of my boutique, one in downtown Chicago and another in a bustling suburb. Each location was a testament to how far I had come, from being someone who felt trapped in a crumbling marriage to becoming a beacon of independence and empowerment. I also started receiving invitations to speak at events, women's forums, entrepreneurship workshops, even panels on financial literacy. At first, I hesitated. Public speaking wasn't something I was comfortable with. But then I remembered all the women like me, women who might be stuck in toxic relationships, unsure of their worth, or afraid to take control of their lives. So, I accepted the invitations and shared my story openly. I talked about the importance of financial independence, trusting one's instincts, and preparing for life's uncertainties. The response was overwhelming. Women approached me after these talks, tears in their eyes, thanking me for giving them hope. Some told me they had left abusive partners. Others said they had finally opened savings accounts or started investing. It wasn't just about my success anymore. It was about inspiring others to find theirs. Meanwhile, Eric continued his futile attempts to reclaim what he thought was rightfully his. He filed endless claims against my assets, trying to argue in court that he deserved a share of my earnings. But every single time, his efforts were met with failure. The evidence was clear. Everything I owned was legally mine, earned through years of hard work and careful planning. Watching him struggle, while I thrived, filled me not with spite, but with a quiet satisfaction. Justice, I realized, had its own way of balancing the scales. As my life soared to new heights, Eric spiraled further downward. After months of living with his parents, a situation that grew increasingly tense and humiliating, he finally moved out. He rented a small, dingy apartment in a part of town he would have once considered beneath him. Gone were the days of luxury cars, designer suits, and fine dining. Now, he lived paycheck to paycheck, working odd jobs just to get by. His once impeccable appearance faded, his confidence shattered. It was ironic, really. Eric had left me for Lauren, convinced that she would bring him happiness and fulfillment. Instead, he ended up alone, stripped of everything he held dear. And Lauren? She disappeared from his life entirely, leaving behind only bitterness and regret. One afternoon, as I was reviewing designs for my upcoming collection at the original boutique, the doorbell rang. I looked up to see Lauren standing there, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly. For a moment, I felt a flicker of surprise, but then I gestured for her to come in. I wanted to apologize, she stammered, avoiding my gaze. I didn't know what kind of person Eric really was until it was too late. I trusted him, believed his lies, and I hurt you in the process. Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with guilt. I studied her for a moment, noting the sincerity in her expression. Part of me wanted to dismiss her outright, to tell her that apologies couldn't undo the damage she and Eric had caused. But another part of me understood her pain. She had been manipulated, just as I had been. But unlike me, she hadn't seen the signs until it was too late. You made a mistake, I said finally, my voice calm but firm. We all do. What matters is whether you learn from it. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I'll never trust anyone like that. Again, she whispered. And I'll never forget what you went through because of us. After she left, I sat quietly for a while, reflecting on our encounter. It struck me that this moment symbolized more than just closure. It represented the final chapter of a painful period in my life. Eric and Lauren's actions had once felt like a betrayal of everything I valued. But now, they seemed insignificant compared to the strength and success I had built in their wake. There are days when I sit quietly in my office, staring at the screenshot of Eric's final message on my laptop. His words remain as cold as they were the first time I read them. You'll never be able to live without me. But every time I look at it, I don't feel anger or sadness. Instead, I smile, a smile full of meaning, a smile that only someone who has weathered a storm and emerged stronger can truly understand. That message is no longer a symbol of betrayal for me. It is a reminder that I have proven something far greater than mere revenge. I have proven that I am stronger than him, not just in how I handled the collapse of our marriage, but in how I rose from the ashes and rebuilt my life. I don't need anger to carry me through my days. I only need the belief that I deserve more than what he ever offered me. Every step I've taken since that day has been the ultimate form of retribution. My business has flourished. My boutique has become one of the most recognized local brands in Chicago, and my name has started to resonate as an inspiring figure for many women. I often receive emails from women who have read my story through articles or media interviews. They write about how my journey gave them the courage to leave unhealthy relationships, to start their own savings, or even to launch their own businesses. Thank you for showing us that we don't need to depend on anyone to feel secure, one woman wrote in her email. You taught me that financial independence isn't just about money, it's about freedom. Reading those words always fills me with a sense of purpose. This journey wasn't just about me and Eric. It was about every woman who has ever felt weak, who has doubted her ability to survive. I want them to know that they can. They are stronger than they think. As for Eric, he remains trapped in the shadows of his past. Occasionally, I hear news about him through old friends or acquaintances who happen to run into him. He still lives in that small apartment, working menial jobs he never dreamed of having. He tries to make new connections, but his reputation precedes him. Every time he attempts to start over, someone recognizes him as the man who destroyed himself out of greed. I no longer feel anger toward him. In fact, I feel pity. Because while he once thought leaving me was a victory, reality has proven otherwise. He lost everything, his family, his dignity, even his sense of self. And me? I keep moving forward, expanding my business, exploring new opportunities, and enjoying a freedom I had never experienced before. One night, as I stood in front of the display window of my first boutique, I realized just how far I had come. The lights of Chicago glimmered in the distance, reflecting the light that now shines in my life. I never expected my marriage to end this way, but I am grateful for the lessons I've learned. I learned that happiness doesn't come from others. It comes from within yourself. I learned that preparation and independence are the strongest defenses against life's uncertainties. And most importantly, I learned that success is the best revenge, not just against others, but for myself. Eric may have thought he broke me, but in reality, he only opened the door to a better life, a life he could never touch, and that is true victory.